clinical social worker, and I spent a lot of my working life at the VA, followed by having a consulting firm where I coached leaders. And I became really interested in the topic of communication, especially when we're under stress during that time. And what I realized is when my coworkers, and especially the leaders, did not speak in a way that demonstrated, you remember the Aretha Franklin song, RESPECT? When they did not speak in a way that demonstrated respect, and I think some of you probably remember that song in the 60s, we had less teamwork, less harmony, less job satisfaction, and then the bottom line of being productive. That didn't even happen very well when the communication wasn't good. But when it was respectful, all of those things were better. So this is true not just when we're at work in a job, but it's true in every relationship we have with our friends, with our family, within our neighborhoods. And so it's a really important topic, I feel. So what do I mean by respect? So these are the three top things that I think of when I think of respect. The first one is being open and honest with each other. And it's not that easy, just you say it and it sounds great, but to do that, we have to be open and honest with ourselves. We have to know our own minds, our own boundaries. We have to be willing to talk about them. We can't really expect people to read our minds. So if you've ever thought or heard someone say, well, if he really liked me, he would know why I'm thinking this way, or he would know what I'm thinking. Well, no, we can't read each other's minds. So we need to be open and honest, and we need to listen to each other. And being open and honest, just going back to number one there, it doesn't mean brutally honest to the point where, you know, people are turned off because we're just being so brutally honest, we're not even being diplomatic. So we have to strike a balance. So part of doing that is by not having either or thinking, but by realizing there's sort of a range in that balance. And then number two, listening to each other. And by that, I mean active listening, where we're making eye contact. We're not just spinning in our heads, what am I going to say next? We are really listening, and that's the best gift we can give another person, the gift of ourselves, the gift of being present and really hearing what they're saying. And then also valuing each other's feelings and needs. And we do that by recognizing other person as a whole person, not just a means of getting something that we want. And the way to do that best is by using kindness, lifting each other up with our words, thanking people, encouraging them, complimenting them, letting them know you see them for who you are. You might be even offering to help them. And it kind of comes down to the golden rule of do unto others what you'd have them do unto you. And also, I like the flip side of that, which is don't do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. So the results of these things that give us respect, that display respect, are what you see on the bottom of this slide. Feeling safe, feeling able to express ourselves. It's a feeling of trust. Feeling accepted for who you are and doing the same for the other person. And then just feeling trust overall, safety and well-being. So honesty naturally does result in some disagreement. You don't want to disappear or shut down because that's not really good communication either. And sometimes you might have to say, I'm a little upset. Can we talk about this later? I'd like to just cool off so I can think better. And that's okay too. You don't really have to respond immediately to everything that's going on. And so I just want to give you a little example of number one, talking openly and honestly with each other. Using I statements is really helpful. So here's a bad example. You wouldn't want to say, you just keep bothering me and I can't meet your needs. It's better, this is a little better, not great, I feel upset when you ask me to join you when you know I'm super busy right now. But the best of all would be, I feel upset that I have to say no so often. Could we agree on a few things to do together so that I don't feel like I have to say no? I don't want to be upset. I value our relationship. So, what do you have to lose? What do I have to lose? Look at the left picture. That's not very attractive one in my mind. You're blaming, accusing, that finger's being pointed. Um, or on the second picture on the right, you're revealing. You're being willing to share your thoughts and beliefs, and you're listening to the other person. And when you do that, you see the overlap, the area of green between revealing and listening. That's the overlap of understanding. And the larger that is, the more you're going to experience harmony in your life and in your relationships. If you live in the state of being on the left, where you're always in judgment and pointing a finger, even in your mind, you're just living in that sort of feeling, then it creates negativity and it spreads it around to other people. So I guess asking ourselves the question, what do I want to express in my life? What do I want to be like in my around my friends, around my family, and in my neighborhood? And it's not just in person, it's also like on Nextdoor, on the website, or on Facebook. What do I want to reflect? And how do I want to show up? We each have choices about our behavior, and we all have a lot to gain and a lot to lose in terms of relationships. We can choose how we behave. And so, if your goal is to improve the relationship, not to win, not to change the other person, you'll find that your communications will be a lot cleaner and easier for others to take. So, what is communication? Well, it's a message or exchange of information, and it consists of all these things: verbal, the words you say, the content. Nonverbal, a lot of what you say is nonverbal. It's you've probably heard percentages, like it's 7% is verbal and 93% is nonverbal. It turns out that it's not that easy to quantify, but the truth is that body language, tone of voice, facial expression, these are really, really important because they tell us a person's emotions. And these show our attitude, our state of mind, and it can come across really different. For example, if I say to you, I'm glad you came today, I'm happy to be with you, versus, oh, hello everyone, I'm so happy to be with you here today. Those convey completely different meanings. And if you don't match, if the words you say don't match your body language, people will trust more the body language, the facial expression, the tone of voice, because that's the emotional content that is translated so easily between people. So if your communication doesn't land, then you might as well not say anything at all. So the point is, we have how we speak is as important as what we say. Even in writing, if you've ever gotten an email from somebody in capital letters, sometimes that feels like you're being shouted at. We used to, my husband said he worked at Microsoft, and he said they used to say, sleep on that email before sending it, so that you don't come across in an angry way. And sometimes people are more prone to doing that in writing or on an email or on a Nextdoor website because they feel a little more anonymous than they do when they're in person. They feel like they're kind of hiding behind something that someone won't see them, and therefore they can misbehave, I guess. So also an important point about this is how you speak. Your emotions can actually hijack your message, because with a flood of emotion, we can't really think very well, think very clearly, and we just kind of shut down the thinking part of our brain, and the hormones the negative hormones or stressful hormones can kind of influence us more. So people are responding based on your emotional content more than even what you're saying. So they'll interpret what that means, and they'll be thinking to themselves, am I safe around this anger? Um, you want to start with a desire to be heard. And if you have that intention and realize everything you do is going into that communication, then that will be helpful. So, what happens when things are going well? It's really easy to communicate in a good way. In the left-hand column, it's easy to be a good person, easy to get along. You feel like there's agreement among everyone. And the power balance feels equal, so you don't get into someone's dominating as much. Even the airtime, the amount of time people speak is part of this. When things are going well, it's just easier to share that and not feel competitive and not take over or have someone else do that. And communication flows, respect is mutual. Whereas, lately we've been under more stress with the pandemic and lots of the issues around that. Emotions are high. We might feel anxious or lonely, but also we could feel irritable and angry. And it's not easy to manage that because anger, especially, and anxiety sometimes can be just directed at the other person. And for example, if you feel insulted or excluded, then that triggers the same thing in us that the limbic system of the brain, the fight versus flight that you've heard about probably all your lives. And that's kind of an unconscious thing, but the reactions might be to avoid or attack back. And when those things take over under stress, then in the right column, you see all the things that happen. Emotions take over, we get defensive. There are disagreements, whether we say them out loud or not. Judgments are going on, power's unbalanced, the airtime. And so people are a lot more likely to dominate. And then respect is lessened or absence. So then there's mistrust. There's a lack of trust. So communication really is not going to have a great chance in that situation. So what can we do? How do we deal with that? Well, first of all, we can acknowledge the stressors. Say to ourselves, well, an insult feels unfair, and realize it's a normal reaction to kind of get your defensive reactions going because it's a threat to our social standing. And actually, studies have shown that the brain draws no distinction between social rejection and physical pain, which is kind of an interesting point, that it hurts. It hurts. So what we can do is we can take a look at what is it that triggers me over the edge and hijacks me so that I'm not being rational. And remind yourself, there really isn't an overt threat to my well-being or safety. I can take a breath. I can stop a minute. There are a number of things, and I'll talk more about that later, that you can do to try to calm yourself down. You can acknowledge the feelings, but try to get past them. Take a pause, take some breaths, count to 10, all those things you've heard that help you calm down. When you're with social media and you see something that you want to respond to, you can wait 10 minutes. Maybe you won't even want to do it if you wait a while. And it allows you to have a moment of choice, to be conscious of what you're saying or doing, if anything. That is one choice too. Just don't do anything. And what it does is it makes a difference between having a constructive communication versus a destructive confrontation. So no matter how provocative or perturbing someone else's comments or behavior, we can learn to manage our own triggers. And that's the part we can play in having a better environment around us. A lot of disagreement is about perspective. So this says, just because you're right doesn't mean I am wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side. So for example, if I'm the guy on the right and I say, I see a 9. My friend is on the left and he says, no, it's a 6. Here's where you want to use your skills. Be curious. Listen. Instead of getting triggered, be curious. Listen and say, ask questions. Let your more evolved brain manage your responses. Ask and be open to learning something that you don't already know. And here's a good question. Help me understand what you are seeing. Describe to me how you see that and why you see it that way. And that openness lets you hear what they're saying. It helps you gain awareness, and then you can have more compassion and you can communicate in a kinder way. And if you let things that you express come from love instead of hostility, then you're going to create more of a virtuous cycle. It rubs off on other people. You don't want a vicious cycle, you want a virtuous cycle. So here are my 5 tips for communicating in stressful times. And I don't know if we've said it yet, but you will be getting these slides if you'd like. So you don't really need to take notes if you feel a need to do that right now. But so number 1 is hitting the pause button. I already mentioned that. So in this world of uncertainty, we're much more likely to overreact than we might have been in the past. The traumatic events can also, though, give us a new appreciation for life and what is important. So in the middle of all these difficulties, uncertainties, we can remember we're all human and kindness goes a long way. So here are the things to try. First, you hit the pause button, and the acronym THINK stands for, is it true? Is it helpful? Am I the one to say it? Some people in this acronym will say, is it inspirational? Is it necessary? Is it necessary now? And is it kind? So that's just something to go through in your mind. And that kind of helps you think it through. Number 2, bring your best self forward. We have a list of articles on our website that you can click on and read the articles. And this one is there. It's from the Mayo Clinic. And it's how to bring down your stress so that you're bringing your best self forward. So in doing this, you remember your emotions will have a big impact on the conversation. Will the person be able to absorb what you're saying, or will they be overwhelmed or angered or defensive about what you're saying? So some of the things you can do are plan ahead to avoid the situations and people that you know are difficult. And that's okay to do. You don't have to be around situations that you know over and over again have triggered you. So you can learn to say no. Don't overextend yourself. Have time to relax in your life and prioritize. And then under alter, what you can do is ask others for what you want. Communicate your feelings openly with I statements. Manage your time better and state your limits or boundaries up front in advance. That makes it a little easier than having to do it right in the moment. And so, for example, if a friend of mine wanted me to meet her at a restaurant, and maybe I didn't feel like going indoor to a restaurant right now, I would say, okay, could we find a place that's outside because I really don't feel comfortable going inside. And then if that's not something she wanted to do, we could find another time when both of us could feel comfortable or another location. So you work it out in advance. And then accept. You can accept by talking with someone, forgiving someone. Anger takes a whole lot of energy. It really does. So, and it hurts you more than it does the other person. So if you use positive self-talk, learn from your mistakes, and you can accept things better. And then the last one is adapt. And adapting, just changing your expectations, adjusting your standards. And you can use a mantra such as, I can handle this. I know I've handled things like this in the past. You can practice stopping your thoughts, reframing with a new viewpoint, and look at the big picture. Will this even matter 6 months from now or a year from now? So those are some of the things. And if you check out that article, you can read more details about it. And then the third one is be curious. Being curious is such a good skill to have. It's because assuming can really turn out badly. You could be right, you could be wrong. But if you're neutral, and that's what I'm suggesting that you could do, if you're neutral and you ask questions, then you're going to learn more about the other person and not just be assuming. You know that this is one of the best ways also to develop empathy, because, and that's a big part of emotional intelligence, to have empathy for other people and be able to put yourself in their shoes. If you're asking those questions that you don't know the answers to and really listening to hear the answers, then that curiosity will serve you well. It will help you be more open to different points of view. Number 4, identify and express your feelings clearly and honestly. Stay connected with kindness and compassion. So to do this, you really have to know yourself and say what you think, what you feel, what you want, what you sense. Some of us have had a hard time pulling back and managing stronger feelings, and others have a harder time expressing anything that might be perceived as negative. So we hold back important information. Both of those are challenges that we need to overcome, and you probably can identify which one you might have a tendency to do. But neither extreme is helpful in relationships. So if you're in a learning mode and willing to express what you're thinking, feeling, wanting, caring about what the other person does, then those are going to help you communicate better. And then the last one, balance the airtime. I like to think about this as a way to give the other person a space and respect and time. You know, I don't think we often think about this very much because some of us are more talkative than others, but there might be that quiet person that has a lot to share that we don't hear from very much. So if you're someone who tends to overtalk, and when you leave the conversation, you might think, oh, did I give so-and-so a chance to even say anything? Then you could even be a little silly with it and try timing, saying, okay, we only have a half hour together. Why don't I take 15 minutes and you take 15 minutes? And it might sound funny, but it's just a way to practice with somebody that you already have a trusting relationship with. In case you are someone who needs to push yourself to talk more, then you might ask for that if you'd like a little more chance to talk. So this is, let's see, it's not quite. So ask until you understand. Ask people what they need from you. Instead of putting others in their place, put yourself in their place. A lack of communication ruins everything because instead of knowing how the other person is feeling, we just assume, and then the judgments come. And the other thing to remember is most people don't want another person to solve all their problems. And one of my favorite questions when I am working as a therapist is, if your best friend had this problem, what would you want to advise her, or what would you want her to consider to improve the situation? Because we all have wisdom inside of us, and others can encourage us to let it rise to the surface, and we can help ourselves that way and others if we can just keep that in mind, that we have this wisdom inside of us. If all else fails, we can agree to disagree. And it's okay to disagree, but it's not okay to disrespect. And here's a quote from one of our colleagues in TLC. Perfection is a direction. He says, perfection is a direction and not a goal. So give yourself some slack. Realize that you need practice to learn anything new or to try and change the way you're doing things. So here are some tips to disagree respectfully. Don't make it personal. Avoid putting down the other person's ideas and beliefs. Use I statements to communicate how you feel. what you think, what you want or need. Listen to the other point of view, stay calm, and think of tensions and distressing feelings like waves in the ocean. We're all part of a larger belonging to humanity and the world, and we can be a positive force within our sphere of influence. So this is the end of the presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa for some questions.
Thank you so much. Wow, we learned a lot. I was taking notes, so thank you so much, Bonnie. I have a couple questions. And again, I encourage the audience to go ahead and submit your questions as well. You can either do that by letting us know, raise your hand, or you can submit a question on the bottom of your screen. So what if I'm trying to do all these things to improve myself and my communications and being patient, and I find that the person that I'm wanting to have better communications with is just not having it, right? They're just, they see me as the old person and they kind of come at you, right? And how do I adjust to this? What do you give as suggestions to that?
Okay, I think you could look at it like a mobile above a crib. Whenever we change something about the way we're behaving, then the balance just gets turned a little bit. So we have to we have to be patient with ourselves as we try these things that I'm recommending, and also with the other person for learning about the new me. We can't expect them to immediately just take it up, because it could be threatening to the balance that you might have had for a long time with this person. And so I guess I would just say, don't be afraid to be the first one to say a kind word, to compliment, to try and turn things into a more positive light. And also realize that it's not going to work with everyone, because some people may not be open to the honesty you're trying to express, or to being kind in response to what you're doing. So you'll learn over time probably which people and which relationships are the most important to you, to hang in there and work things out with the other person. It's worth it. I think it's worth it if you take the risk, and especially if you tell somebody what you're doing. Tell them, look, I really want to show up with more kindness. I know we disagree about a few things, but I don't think it has to hurt our relationship. I don't think it has to hurt the love or the caring that we have for each other.
I think that's a great point. And maybe just saying, I'm trying something new because perhaps maybe I wasn't as effective before, or I think we both have some things to learn, at least I know I do. And so maybe just acknowledging that you are shifting that pendulum ever so slightly, right? And that you're willing to try something new, because sometimes we have relationships with people and it's so ingrained in us, right? They can't get over where the relationship has been if it's a little bit damaged. And sometimes starting anew or a refresh, or acknowledging that maybe we need some techniques, we're going to try some techniques such as listening or trying to understand their point of view. Sometimes just acknowledging that helps.
And baby steps with people that we know we have trust and caring already, then that's another good way to go. Well, those are good points, Lisa.
I think too, even acknowledging that this is valuable enough that you're willing to change or try to evolve or try to improve on, right? Because then that tells them that this is a valuable relationship, that even though it might be difficult for both of you, you want to invest the time and energy into this moment.
Right. When you express that intention, people will have a tendency to honor it. Really. Because they know it's coming from inside you, The way you're expressing it is important again.
If your best friend had this problem or was communicating this way, how would you handle it, right? So you're asking back, how would you like me to go forward, right? Where do you see us, and where do you see that maybe we can make suggestions on our relationship to have better communication? And that's a good
Absolutely.
question, right? You're validating their opinion and how it's important to you in the relationship.
Yes. And you're honoring them by trying to work it out too. Like I had a friend who, she was my dearest friend, but she was always late. Every time we were supposed to meet together, she was late. 15, 20 minutes. And I'd be at a restaurant and I was never late. For some reason, I never learned that I could be 20 minutes late. I was always there. And so finally I decided, you know, this is making me I'm feeling resentful, and this isn't fair to her either. So I brought it up to her. I said, Linda, I really would like to work something out. I'd like to agree each time we meet on a time when you know you can make it on time. Because when I sit here, I think I'm not important to you. My time is not important to you. And I just told her how I felt. And she said, absolutely. And we did work it out from there. Not every time, but most of the time.
That's lovely.